Shana Tova. So most of you know I had a baby this year. Thank you all for kvelling with us over the endless stream of photos and the updates on every tiny milestone. He started clapping this week. We're very excited. It has indeed been a blessing to have this little bundle of joy bringing us smiles during these very unusual circumstances. The most regular question that I'm asked as a mom returning to work is about sleep. Is the baby sleeping through the night yet? Many of you have been very sweetly concerned, probably noticing me stifling a yawn, or perhaps you see the growing circles under my eyes that are hard to hide under the glaring light of Zoom. And the answer is yes, the baby is sleeping through the night. The big kids do too, more or less. You know who isn't sleeping through the night? That's right, me. As I've shared before, I'm a worrier. And boy, 5780 has been great fodder for worrying. So which worry shall we perseverate on tonight? I'm not even going to mention the newest news. How about the challenges of raising 3 children in the midst of a global pandemic? Or whether or not to send them to school in person? Or protecting the health of our families and loved ones? I have tossed and turned thinking about new, creative, and accessible ways to be present for this community, while trying not to fixate on fears about assimilation and potential for synagogue longevity. I worry about the toxic anti-Semitism of both the alt-right and the far left. I worry about the pending fallout of the upcoming election. I think about what the new normal of a post-COVID world will be, and if we will ever find a new normal, and if we even remember what normal is. So take your pick. There is plenty to fear, and I know that I'm not alone, awake at night, worrying. Tomorrow morning, we will read about Abraham, and we will put ourselves in his shoes, imagining the day that God decides to test him. Take your son, God says. Kach na et bincha, et yachidcha, asher ahavta, et Yitzchak. Your dear one whom you love, Yitzchak. V'ha'alehu sham le'olah, and offer him there as a burnt offering. Abraham rises early that day, rousing his son and his servants to begin the trek up the mountain. And the rabbis wonder, why did Abraham rise so early? According to medieval commentator Rashi, he was eager to fulfill God's command. But the midrashic wisdom of Bereshit Rabbah counters that Abraham rose by God's will, the Holy One's divine powers. But I wonder, as a parent who holds a world of worries, perhaps Abraham rose early because he too hadn't slept. Perhaps he too was restless. Perhaps he too saw the world changing around him, and perhaps he feared for his child, and perhaps he couldn't tame the wild thoughts long enough to sleep. In high school physics, we were preparing for an assignment which required us to construct a bridge out of balsa wood and glue. And our teacher showed us a video of the original Tacoma Narrows Bridge, otherwise known as Galloping Gertie. In the grainy black and white video taken in 1940, you can see the bridge bending and twisting in the wind. And then next, the bridge splinters, and it cracks, and it falls into the water below. Our bridges were supposed to fare better than dear old Gertie when we put them under pressure. Now, going into the assignment, I was already hesitant about heights, and the video hadn't helped matters. And while rationally I knew that this was a history lesson and not a current snapshot, I couldn't forget the image of that horizontal bridge going vertical and then violently breaking apart. So still today, I need to take a deep, centering breath before crossing a bridge. I hold the steering wheel tightly with 2 hands, and I focus intently until I am once again over land. It's something about the heights and the narrow shoulder and that image of galloping Gertie that is still in my mind that just freaks me out. My fear of bridges is manageable, especially since moving from the Bay Area to the desert, but it's still there. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov teaches, Kol ha'ulam kulo gesher tsar me'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. The most important part is not to be afraid. We are always on a bridge of sorts, carefully crossing the challenging threshold of this life. Pressure is regularly placed upon us as we try not to crumble under the weight. The world is a frightening place, and right now it feels so very unstable. We are dependent on strong Wi-Fi and reliable mail service and masks that are worn over the mouth and the nose, and we are trusting one another to make smart choices about social distance and maintaining synagogue membership and opening schools. How many of these weighty fears can the bridge hold? Those churning waters below seem hungry, as if they are waiting for us to tumble down, drowning in the depth of our fear. Commentary Likutei Tinyana offers another read of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov's famous reflection. It does not say, lo lefached klal, don't be afraid at all. Rather, the original text said, klal yipached shelo, don't become paralyzed by fear. This is to say, we will all encounter narrow bridges. The most important part is not to let fear keep us from reaching the other side. Jewish tradition teaches us about 2 distinct kinds of fear. According to Rabbi Alan Liu, my fear of bridges is that first kind, pachad. Pachad is projected or imagined fear. It is astounding how often such fears become the organizing principles of our lives and how much they close us off from the world. Pachad is paralyzing. Pachad keeps us awake at night. Pachad makes us find another route, avoiding the narrow bridge altogether. But there is another kind of fear that dwells within us too. Rabbi Liu continues, Norah is a very different kind of fear. It is the fear that overcomes us when we suddenly find ourselves in possession of considerably more energy than we are used to. A mixture of fear and awe. We call this bristling energy Norah. Norah tries to push us open. The fear we experience is simply our resistance to this opening. This norah, this awe, is a surge of adrenaline. Norah, or awe, forces us to take a risk, to make a change. Norah makes us brave. Norah, or awe, is what motivates us when we venture carefully into the world, masks on, hand sanitized, distance between us. Norah is what allows us to imagine a high holy day season that looks different from anything we have ever experienced before. Norah, or awe, is what allows us to look one another in the eye with kindness as we talk about how and why we disagree. Norah, awe, is what helps us to make hard choices, to find solutions. In spite of our worry, in the face of our fear, Norah, awe, guides us on to that very narrow bridge. We need to know that we can and we will make it to the other side. And there we will find constructive antidotes to anti-Semitism, vibrant post-pandemic life, relationships still intact after a contentious election, resilient kids who are doing okay. With awe, we put ourselves in Abraham's shoes. We rise early in the morning. We are tested too. Abraham holds the knife over Isaac, his son, his dear one, and he hears an angel speak. Ki yireh Elohim, you approach God with awe. He lifts his eyes, and there is the ram, waiting to take Isaac's place on the altar. Were Abraham filled with pachad, he would have frozen with fear, kept his eyes turned down, his heart closed to God's message. But instead, with awe, he lifts his eyes, he opens his heart, and writes a different end to this story. The rebuilt Tacoma Narrows Bridge opened in 1950. It still stands today, though it is now part of a twin bridge complex that ushers travelers safely and efficiently between Tacoma and the Kitsap Peninsula. It has been built with wisdom, with understanding, and with a sense of awe, a deep respect for the architecture that keeps the bridge intact as travelers make their way safely to the other side. This new year, let's redesign the bridge. Let's face our fears and our worries with Norah. We can build ourselves a bed that lets us sleep like a baby. And when we rise, ready to approach 5781 with clear minds and refreshed souls, we notice there are new possibilities waiting for us in the thicket. The whole world is like a bridge. It is narrow and it is rickety. And we aren't always sure that it can bear the weight of our burdens. But when we summon the courage to rise above the choppy waters, we remember Ha'ikar. We just took the first step. We just did the most important part.